Howdy, y'alls. It's me, Dr. Edwards, again. This time I'm back to chat with y'all about Module 4. Now, I gotta say, when I look at the kind of the title for this module, it, our readings don't necessarily meet the general topic. Also, we've really kind of focused on museums and previous sections. So this section really doesn't deal with museums so much. It actually deals with the commodification of culture through tourism. As you'll see in this week's readings, it's really all about how there is this relationship, these interactions between Western groups, primarily tourists, and local groups that are the hosts of such tourism. And so that's what we really kind of focus on here. And we have two great articles. Views from the Hotel Window. This is pretty famous. And we also have another one about anthropology of tourism, forging new ground for ecotourism and other alternatives. Now, just to kind of stick with my general format, I'm going to go over each of these and kind of highlight some key things that you're going to want to think about and keep in mind. So starting with views from the hotel window, this gives a great overview of kind of the entire field, or what should we call it? All the work of anthropology regarding tourism. It gives you some pretty in-depth literature review about who's done what in this realm of research. And I gotta say, it's very comprehensive. If you're interested in tourism and within anthropology, these are articles you're going to want to read at a very fine level. Incidentally, these tend to be used in graduate courses, so you're getting some real meaty stuff here. Don't be scared of it, right? And I encourage you, if you have any questions about things that you read in these articles, please don't hesitate. Email me, call me, text me. You can set up a Skype meeting. We can go over it. I can offer you extra insight and detail into anything in these. So back to views from the hotel window. You know, what this article really kind of, once you get past the history of anthropology and tourism, what it really kind of focuses in on is this subjective relationship between outsiders, the tourists, right, and local groups, local communities. And these relationships are decidedly unequal. Okay. Let me try to give you some examples. Hawaii. All right. Prior to World War II, it was a tourist destination, but it was really after World War II where the rise of Western tourism really kind of took off. Right, prior to World War II, it was fairly limited, but after World War II, it became kind of a staple. It was a fundamental thing that all Westerners tended to participate in, if you would. You can look at the history about how there was increased expendable money, and this allowed people to travel more, things like that. But what we want to focus on is the impact that really kind of has, the relationship that are developed out of these kind of engagements. So using Hawaii, prior to World War II, there wasn't really a large commodification of local culture. And by commodification, this is an important concept. That means that you're turning something into a commodity, all right? Something that can be consumed, all right? Often you pay for it, right? Just like you go and buy, I don't know, a can of beans at the store. That's a commodity, all right? You go, you pay for it. Well, think of tourism and that same sort of thing. Instead of going to the grocery store, you're going to another place, and you are paying for these experiences, to see things, to experience things, and you want to experience authentic things, right? You don't want to see fake things, right? Because somehow that would undervalue the experience from the consumer's perspective. So this really just think about the power dynamics involved here. You have outsiders, let's call them Westerners, right, that are coming to the local, all right, and that involves kind of a negotiation of power. Who can afford to do that? Well, the locals can't afford to come to the West. All right, their economic deficiencies. Well, maybe not deficiencies, but discrepancies. People may not have the means. All right. Uh, so that is, as I've shared in other little videos, is very colonial, if you would, that these outsiders somehow have this innate privilege that allows them the means to go and visit distant people in distant places. Okay? Not everyone can do it. It's a limited few, right? And there's a long history of it. Back kind of really starting in the 1800s, you had grand tours. These were for the elite, and they would travel around the world, usually to major cultural and urban centers. If you were in the U.S., you would travel to Europe. You would definitely hit Paris. You'd hit London, probably Prague. And then you'd continue around the world, and you'd hit I don't know, Marrakesh, and then New Delhi, and then probably Singapore or something like that. And this grand tour would literally take over a year sometimes. So there's this long history of this sort of relationship, and it was really born out of the colonial experience, the colonial agenda. All these places catered to receiving these outsiders, these foreigners, and it creates some issues. There are clear impacts. What would local communities be doing if these tourists weren't coming? All right, that's another way to kind of think about it. But because the tourists are coming, there are certain opportunities that locals want to benefit from. There's money to be made. So kind of getting back to Hawaii, the hula is a great example. Prior to World War II, it was only performed in certain circumstances. It tended to be fairly traditional. But after World War II, Hawaii really kind of booms as a tourist destination. And you see that the hula transforms. It transforms into a commodity. It transforms into something that other people are digesting. Right? And this is the really interesting thing, because the performer has insights into what the consumer wants, they will often perform to that. Okay? That is really cool when you think about anthropology, because we're talking about a dynamic, a relationship, and one informs the other. In my own work in West Africa, while I don't focus on tourism is a major issue involved with it. In fact, I don't know, one of the markets that I work in is strictly oriented towards Western tourists. It's called the Artisana, and it makes tourist goods. I don't know. I was looking around my office to see if I had a piece laying around. Not readily on hand. Actually, hold on here. I'm going to pause this. All right, I'm back. I went digging through my closet, and I found some really good examples of tourist goods. These are actually from my own work in West Africa, in Mali specifically. So I'm going to take you on a little show and tell here. Funny object. It's a coin purse. And the reason I'm interested in it is because it's made out of a particular wildlife species. In this case, this is ball python. Now, this tourist market that I worked in and did research in, they mass produce these things, and they sell them like hotcakes to tourists. Something like this would go you, I don't know, about $10 in US dollars. And yeah, here's another one. This one's made out of Nile crocodile. This one might go you a little bit more, maybe in the $15 range compared to the ball python. That's because it takes more time and more money to work Nile crocodile than it does ball python. All right. But the key thing to note here is these are consumable objects that the tourist will purchase as a kind of a keepsake or a memento of their experience of visiting that place, right? This literally creates an entire market to serve that demand. People, they don't go and work, plant crops. They literally make things like this to sell to tourists. Here's another one. Here's a Nile crocodile wallet. And yeah, give you the inside view, right? Now, I actually, in my research, I worked in this market. I actually apprenticed. I made these, all right? And I made them to gain an insight into how and why and by what means local vendors, market vendors, kind of meet foreign demand. And the cool thing is that they got their fingers on the pulse of Western consumers, right? They're not, actually, let me back up. They'll have their fingers on the pulse of Western consumers, and they will readily modify and change and perform their own culture to meet those demands. Okay, so I don't know. Give you a very specific example. This is my cell phone holder. All right, and this was made by a friend of mine in the tourist market because he identified that cell phones are on the boom. All these Western tourists, they all got cell phones, right? Cell phone case. Put it in. You even got a little belt loop on the back. So yeah, this guy identified a niche market where he could produce these things and make a profit because he saw Westerners wanted them. All right. There are other examples that these are very kind of modern commodities, if you would, but there are others that are traditional. You might find, traditional weaving, all right? But it's being made to be consumed by Western consumers, all right? So the maker is going to take all that into consideration. What does the consumer want to see in this, all right? And they may even employ unique selling strategies. They might describe it as being traditional or used for a particular thing. And that kind of supports that the consumer is getting a piece of authentic culture. All right. Let me put those examples away. I got a few more I can share here. Here's a crazy one. This may be hard to see here. This is a guitar strap. And this also shows the kind of the uniqueness and abilities of the markets. I actually, hold on. There we go. Had this made. It was a custom order. I had a guitar strap. I had this made when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And my old guitar strap was rotting out. And so I befriended one of the guys in the market, the tourist market, and he's like, yeah, no, I can totally make one of those. What do you want it made out of? And he gives me a selection of different types of animals. This is made out of Savannah monitor hide. Nothing protected or endangered or any legal issues surrounding that. Okay. Some others. Here we got, this is a black cobra belt. Lots of tourists like these. These go for like 15 to 20 bucks. Here we got a Nile crocodile. This will go 20 to 25. Yeah, so you get an idea of how extensive these markets can be. And think about all the other infrastructure that's associated with this sort of tourism. All the hotels, right? You got to have places for these tourists to live, and they wanna have their creature comforts, right? You got to have air conditioning. You got to have hot water, a continental breakfast, all that. Now think of all the support staff that's required to support that sort of industry. You start transforming the local economy of these places, all geared towards Western consumption. All right. So yeah, I've mentioned before that we have this kind of theoretical perspective where we look at stuff as performance, right? That things are being performed. Well, this is another great kind of area to use that perspective. Why are people doing what they're doing? It gives insights into issues of inequality. Even within the local community that may be, uh, um, uh, orienting themselves to meet the demands of Western consumers. Some people are going to get more out of that than others. For example, the maitre d' of a Western-style hotel is going to be front and center. This is a person that's going to be interacting with tourists daily, right, all day long. And they are going to be able to negotiate and interpret Western consumer desires. And they will probably get more of an economic profit out of it. So yeah, these are some things that we want to kind of keep in mind. Places as spectacle, right? As some place to go, to visit, to see, to experience, to have some sort of authentic experience. That's the ultimate that tourists tend to go for. And actually, on the other side of things, in my own research, just to give you a nice practical example, there's another market. You guys have seen it before in some of the stuff I've shared. It's called the Marabaga Yoro, which means secret keeper place. It's a traditional medicine market. It sells about 500 different species of critters. Now, tourists over the past 20 years or so have really kind of focused on this place because it's steeped in tradition, right? It's traditional medicine market. And so there are now tour groups that come to visit this market to experience that traditional culture. There are even villages that, you come out for a traditional village experience. You go out to the village and the local headman will be all dressed in his full regalia. He'll put on some spectacle, some traditional dance, kind of like the hula, like I talked about before about Hawaii. So yeah, like everyone, there are these kind of really unique relationships between these things. But I can share some of, sorry, I'm digging through boxes here, traditional culture that people are after. I can kind of show you some of this stuff. So at the traditional medicine market, tourists come and they often want to get their picture taken, all right, next to a vendor and their stall, which has got all the animal parts on it. That's somehow exotic. And we have, all sorts of bits and pieces of animal hides. We got warthogs' tusks. Let's see here. Porcupine quills. And some tourists may even want to buy a little piece of it to take home. In fact, that's one of the ways I got involved in this market. I saw a Peace Corps volunteer back when I served in the Peace Corps. I saw him buy a baboon paw as a gag gift for his uncle back home. All right? It was him buying a piece of traditional culture, and he himself transformed the meaning of it and giving it to his uncle as a gag gift. All right? But local vendors catch on to this, right? They're like, oh, why is this Westerner buying this baboon paw? Well, maybe I can get more money out of that, right, than selling it to a local who would use it for traditional medicine. And so they do. They'll go so far as to give you an elaborate story telling you about the various uses of this baboon paw and, its place in traditional medicine and its local value. And all of that is geared towards selling the commodity, if you would, to this foreigner. I don't mean to go off on too much of a deep end there. Sorry, it's my research, so I get really excited about it. But yeah, these examples really kind of underscore this relationship, this dynamic between local cultures, communities, groups, individuals, right, and those that are coming to consume it. Now, as the other article was this forging new ground for ecotourism and other alternatives. The first part of this really recaps a lot of the views from the hotel window article. It's got a great quote from Victor Turner there. He's a unnotable anthropologist. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. This article, sorry, not he, Stranza. One of the things that I really like is how she talks about how locals will toy with tourists, and it's kind of talking about some of those things that I mentioned before about how a vendor will give a unique story to something so it's consumed. I could give you all sorts of stories, and I'm trying not to go off on too many tangents here. But one of the key things that you want to focus in on here is, this commodification process is the same when you look at ecotourism. All right, this is this new idea that's kind of been growing over the past 20 years or so. That instead of going to see the culture, all right, to have that authentic cultural experience, now tourists are really interested in going and seeing nature, all right, to have this natural experience. Sorry for all the air quotes. I'm sure you're getting annoyed by them by now. But yeah, just think about it. Like these same sorts of patterns are seen when you kind of present nature as the commodity to be consumed. Madagascar is a great example of this. If you look in the literature, Madagascar tends to be highlighted as a place under threat. The nature is disappearing. All right, and at the same time, it's also presented as one of the last places where you can go and see real nature. All right, so two different statements, but both of those statements actually influence and encourage tourists to come and see it before it disappears or it's besmirched, before it's tainted, before it's tarnished. And there's a huge ecotourism industry that is created through that. You see local hotels being built to take tours of national parks and wildlife preserves and things like that. Now, the only real difference between this and that whole authentic cultural experience model is that it's nature that becomes the commodity here. Local communities are still going to try to maximize what they get out of it, right? They're going to readily exploit certain resources to meet that outside demand. Now, I don't want you to get the idea that everything is dictated by the West, right? It's really easy to fall down and just kind of see things in that perspective. And I stress not to, because there are always exceptions, all right? It's not just that the West is dictating these relationships. They do play a significant role, all right? I mean, they are the elite. They have the means. They are the privileged individuals that go to these places. You don't see a Malagasy coming to, here, Eugene, Oregon, as a tourist, right? I would suspect such is very uncommon. But you see a heck of a lot of Westerners going to Madagascar, all right, to experience the nature, experience the culture. But you will always find groups in these places that may not be down with these Western consumers. In fact, there's often a local conflict. You'll find typically there are local communities that are divided on, we want just to be our own thing, and there'll be others that are like, oh no, this is a great opportunity to for our own development. We can develop our infrastructure, education systems through all the proceeds that are generated from this sort of tourism. So I want to encourage you to think about both of those sides, that it's not just a one-way street. Um, in fact, this you will always find within any of these communities this basic divide, and it's a real kind of moral conundrum for some individuals, based on my own experience. With the various market vendors that I've worked with. There's some that readily play to Western desires, right? And others that are like, nope, I want no part of that. I find that offensive. I don't like selling my culture like that. Not down with it. So keep in mind that it's not just West dictates to the rest, right? That in any of these dynamic relationships, there's going to be a vast spectrum of perspectives, right? We're just kind of focusing on two of them, if you would, but keep in mind that it's more fluid, a broader spectrum. All right, I think that's where I'm going to end with talking about tourism and anthropology and the impacts thereof. Next, I want to talk about, let's see here, we got your milestone 2 coming up. Now, for your first one, you identified 2 additional parties. You had to outline the basic interests of all 5 parties, because you're given 3 and you picked 2. And you had to write a statement of interest and then kind of weigh the interests of those parties. Now, for milestone 2, you got to do some research. This is actually a literature review. And let me give you the basics of a literature review. Do not use Wikipedia. Don't do it. Don't want to see it. No Encyclopedia Britannica, no dictionaries. Those do not qualify as scholarly sources. To do a good literature review, first, you need to have you need to know where to look. I highly recommend Shapiro Library. They have great tools that you can use to search for relevant and scholarly literature that pertains to this project. So, a literature review, the way you tend to do it is you go and you search. In this case, you're going to be wanting to search for things that are focused around your 5 parties, right? You need to get 2 scholarly sources for each of your parties, right? So that's a total of 10 sources. And to search for good stuff, you're going to want to, use a combination of search terms. Like, I don't know, say one of your parties is local Native American groups. So you might say, because this project's located in Virginia, Virginian Native American cultural resource management. Okay? And that will probably bring up some interesting stuff. Some stuff that might highlight what local Native American groups may be interested in, right? Where do they situate themselves? There, you might find past examples that you can draw on and see clear patterns and use those to kind of support your points. I don't know, another one here, state government, because that's one of the, I believe, required parties that you have to deal with. look up, and I've actually already sent out an announcement where I share some key documents such as Section 106 review. This is something that has to be done to meet both state and federal requirements. So you could look up, the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO is what it's called for, and look and see what they require, what their standards are. You can also see the standards for recommendations, right, for ways that the state has to deal with various cultural resources. In this case, burial mounds and a historic farmstead that may be associated with slavery. So I hope that helps show, give you an idea of, how to use search terms, where to use those search terms, Shapiro Library. Now, in preparing this, all right, as a document, what I would suggest is you have a label for each of your parties, right? You find the source, you give an APA style reference, right? Complete APA style. You also give a brief statement about what is of value in that article. How does it pertain to what you're researching? I mean, to this project, right? So you might just note that Virginia SHPO has documents on the requirements to meet various things. Okay, and you would do that for each of your parties, and 2 sources each. So you just give the reference, and then you give a couple of sentences about what it is. All right, that helps me understand that if you're kind of focusing in the right area or not. Then within each of those sections, for each of your parties, you're going to have to write a full paragraph. All right, and you're going to want to answer 2 key questions in that. Have they been involved in anything like this in the past? Or would their involvement in an archaeological discovery be motivated by unethical behavior? Okay, so this is where you kind of apply insights from the resource, from the scholarly source, and you apply it towards your project. I hope that makes sense. And again, I would suggest, just having a section for each of your parties. So you say local Native American groups, you identify your 2 sources, you give like a 1 to 2 sentence statement about what each of those are, and then you give a paragraph after that addresses the 2 questions, right? Have they been involved in anything like this in the past, and would their involvement in an archaeological discovery be motivated by unethical behavior? And be specific, all right? Don't just go like, yeah, they're going to be interested in, and just leave it at that. No. Tell me why they're going to be interested in, all right? What is going to motivate them? That's the motivation aspect, all right? And then you need to assess if that may be unethical or, doesn't violate ethics, that they have every right to that. So I hope that breakdown helps. And of course, if you have any questions, any concerns, don't you hesitate to ask. I'm here to help you in any and every way possible, and I'm readily available to answer your questions. So this is where I'm going to leave it for this week. I'll put some more in the announcement, the written portion of the announcement about the discussion and other key things to keep in mind. So have a great one, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.